So he did vent his frustration with President Putin and started talking about secondary sanctions on Russian oil. People weren't quite clear what that meant. But the truth is, he hasn't done anything.
Mark Urban is here, as he is every Monday, to talk us through the big foreign policy, diplomatic and defence stories. Hello, Mark. Welcome back.
Good morning.
Good to have you with us, as always. Let's talk tariffs. The UK won't impose retaliatory tariffs on US goods, despite British exporters being hit by American duties on Wednesday. As Tom Calver, the Times data editor who we were just speaking to, told us, we're still not quite sure what to expect here on tariffs. Talks are still underway between London and Washington. What do you think we're trying to get out of it? And do you think we have any hope of getting out of it what we want to get out of it? Or is Donald Trump just going to do what Donald Trump does?
Well, I think it is right to say that the people in Whitehall who are party to the talks are now pretty pessimistic. I've seen that reported, and I've also heard it from someone I was talking to. They now think that this idea that, well, hold up, because, we're working on this trade deal that you've promised us. Well, trade deals notoriously take years and years to arrive at. And I think they've come to the conclusion that the UK will not be able, in the interim, to avoid tariffs, for example, on cars, which, as we know, are a big part of what the UK exports to the US. I think I've seen a figure of $9 billion a year on that trade for the UK. So it's pretty important for the UK economy, and it looks like it's happening. Now, there are two dates this week on the tariff thing. Tuesday, Trump has a diary date, if you like, for getting a report back about the tariff strategy as a whole. All across all sectors of the economy, which is supposedly meant to give some, sort of coherence to which US industries is he trying to protect, etc. And then Wednesday, we're supposed to get the fine print on the automotive industry, and that's when it looks like, barring a sort of diplomatic breakthrough by the UK, that those UK car taxes will be announced.
I mean,
tariffs, I beg your pardon.
In the past, he's gone to the wire with tariffs first time around, and then not done them, and then just sort of done them later. Which obviously this hurts us. Who does it hurt the worst? Like, is it Canada? Is it Mexico? Is it China? Who's going to be most upset about this?
Well,
is it Germany?
Do you remember when during those long negotiations and discussions we had as a nation about Brexit, some of the experts referred to the gravity theory of trade. I don't know if you remember that.
No.
But they were basically saying, because Europe is so close to us, it'll be really hard to make up for it by deals with countries on the Pacific Rim or South America, whatever. This global Britain vision. The reason why it was going to be really hard to make up for what we were losing in EU trade terms. And I think the same is true with the US. The gravity theory is pretty important here, which is why Canada and Mexico are so sewn in. And partly this is also, of course, the trade arrangements that Trump reached with those countries during his first term, which means this business, when you read about some car having assembly, parts of it being assembled, the engine going back and forth 3 or 4 times across the Canadian border. So it's really problematic for those two countries. Although coming back to Trump's inconsistencies, it is interesting now that Mark Carney is the Prime Minister there. He's suddenly completely changed his tone towards Canada, but it does look like those tariffs are still going to happen on the automotive industry, for example. And there are so many other areas, energy, food and drink, all that stuff, where there's a big trade with Canada that will really, really be seriously affected.
Well, he's calling April the 2nd Liberation Day with the tariffs. What do we know about how do we expect about how this is going to play out in the US itself? Because, I mean, as far as one can tell, he still seems to have sort of broad support. That's not going to last if it starts really pushing up prices.
Yep, I mean, who's to know? Yeah, I mean, the inflation picture was a big reason, I think, why people voted for him. Joe Biden had stimulated the economy in various ways and tried to do things that were very much in keeping with Trump's first-term ideology. In other words, bringing things like advanced microchip or mega battery factories back into the US. And so all this stimulus was going on, factories being built all over the US, particularly in the southwest of the US. And that generated immigration. And more economic heat, more people being needed to build the factories, labour rates going up, all that stuff, energy costs, all of it. And Trump successfully kind of sold that to the US public as Bidenflation, a thing that had come about from, in fact, Joe Biden pursuing many of the economic objectives that Trump had set out in his first term. So, yes, it was a very unhappy accident or unintended consequence, if you like, of the Biden economic policy. Now, if you enforce immigration more strictly, as obviously he's doing, and you put tariffs on, it's impossible to see anything other than even more inflation being the result.
So you'd have thought. Well, look, in other Trump news, the president has said he is, quote, pissed off with President Putin and is ready to hit the Russian economy with sanctions. He spoke to NBC about this on Sunday. Basically, he's unhappy with Putin's response to the sort of very tentative ceasefire deals that have been discussed, right?
Yeah. Now, a few weeks ago, I expressed a pious but vain hope that we could prevent Trump from dominating all our discussions.
Yeah.
And here we are.
Hell no.
Now, yeah, hell no.
I've got 2 more Trump topics to ask you about after this.
Oh, yes. I know it's coming. So look, the thing is here, we're now at the pivot point of this conversation between the watch what he does rather than what he says.
Yep.
So all that stuff around tariffs is either what he does, because clearly we've had executive orders, we've had real-world consequences. All of that is happening, and as we speak, stock markets are reacting very negatively to the tariff expectations. Now let's get into the more vague area of where Trump might be using some of these statements for distraction or just pure frustration. Now, it's pretty clear with the Ukraine peace deal that having had these conversations in Saudi Arabia, which he hoped would generate a momentum towards a general ceasefire, it hasn't happened. And of course, he's now blaming both leaders, actually. So in this conversation with the journalist from NBC yesterday, he did sort of take a dump on Putin and said, well, sorry, I'm being a bit lavatorial here, because he said he was pissed off.
Fair enough, yeah.
Pissed off, yeah, that's merely accurate
One
reporting.
influence is as good as another, that's fine, yeah.
Exactly. So that's all fine. And of course, thinking about people like even, Nigel Farage, for example, was commenting that he thought Trump was not being even-handed in the search for peace with Ukraine and was favouring Russia too much. So he did vent his frustration with President Putin and started talking about secondary sanctions on Russian oil. People weren't quite clear what that meant. But the truth is, he hasn't done anything there. He's also frustrated with Zelensky because it's pretty clear that the US, having twice tried to reinterpret this minerals extraction deal, is now trying to reinterpret it in such a way that is crudely exploitative of Ukrainian resources. And unsurprisingly, Zelensky's just said no. Yeah. So I think Trump's frustration is building up on the Ukraine thing, that it's going to prove very hard to deliver even a ceasefire, let alone a peace agreement. And therefore, he's venting at both leaders. The fascinating thing will be, does he do anything concrete on Russia?
I mean, now's the point where we should probably remember that he did say he was going to end this war on day one after being elected. He's also said that he's not joking, in the same interview, not joking about the possibility of serving a third term. There is a two-term limit
22nd Amendment,
in the US Constitution. So, I mean, whether he's joking or not, this can't happen, can it?
It can't happen in the current constitutional situation. Steve Bannon has talked about this. J.D. Vance has hinted, maybe there's some way that the president could run for another term, that sort of thing.
Do they mean it, do you think? I
think if you aspire to leadership of MAGA, you have to say that for the time being. You have to, after all, praise the emperor. I think for Trump himself, I would put this at this stage of his presidency in the area of sort of distraction and trolling.
We used to say that about Greenland.
Oh, totally. Yeah, no, absolutely. absolutely. But I mean, once again, I think if we start to see things actually happening, the 2/3 majority of the Senate, these kind of things, when people start talking about constitutional amendment, if we start to see things actually happening on the Hill, then we'll be in a different league on this one.
Finally, Mark, you wrote in yesterday's Sunday Times about the Signal debacle, the leaked group chat of last week, and the implication for America's relationship with its allies generally. Do you think Donald Trump minds that this played out so publicly? Is he angry about it? Is he embarrassed about it? Or does he care as little as he sounds like he does?
Well, no, there was some briefing over the weekend that he had considered firing Mike Waltz last week. It's embarrassing, and I think probably in his heart of hearts he knows it shouldn't have happened. I mean, you don't have to be versed in all the kind of intricacies and mysteries of the American culture of official secrecy to see that what happened was pretty disastrous.
Bad,
yeah, it was pretty disastrous. It was a failure of kind of discipline in a way, wasn't it, for the principals involved in the way they communicated. My instinct about this is that Mike Waltz, the National Security Advisor, who was the guy who put the journalist Jeffrey Goldberg onto this Signal group in the first place, he made the mistake, and he's come out with all sorts of excuses. Oh, the number was filed under someone else's name, or things like that. He's tried to explain it. I'm not sure he's out of danger yet. And I think similarly, Pete Hegseth, the Defence Secretary, this might be one of the things that we come to see as the first of 3 strikes or whatever before he was out.
What impact do you think this will have had on intelligence sharing? Because obviously this isn't super for America's allies if they think this is what's going to happen to the intelligence. So I guess America's always been quite leaky with intelligence in different ways, hasn't it?
Well, yes. I mean, I think that the danger here is the perception that the people, for example, on that chat, which included, the Director of National Intelligence, the Secretary of State, all sorts of people, as well as Mike Waltz and Pete Hegseth, is that they are, as one CIA guy I know says, not serious people. That's the danger. I think what we find is that in the kind of ecosystem of intelligence, the sort of really delicate flower is the human source stuff. Anything relating to a spy who might be on the streets of Yemen and now fearing for his or her life is regarded as much more sensitive. That's where the fact that they're cavalier with secrets could cause countries to restrict. I think with the big stuff, the signals intelligence, which we rely on a lot in this country because of our partnership with the Americans, much harder. They're hardwired together.